out with the break of dawn. Canvas skies and the show goes on. Iron stakes and the hammer sound. Building dreams on this muddy ground. With sawdust running through our veins, we do it for the faces in the crowd. Step right up with R&B, 'cause this ain't just a show, it's circus history.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome to Off the Rail Podcast, your podcast for everything circus. We're your Off the Rail ringmasters. I'm R. This is B. How you doing, B?
Doing pretty good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. And today's guest is Guilford Adams. How you doing today, Mr. Adams?
I'm doing great, R. I hope you're doing well too, B. I'm doing great.
Wonderful. If you guys don't know, he did a documentary that you can catch on Amazon Prime right now. It's called American Clown. I highly recommend it. It's good. Now, Guilford, normally I would start by asking what got you to run away with the circus. I want to start with you by asking what got you to the clowning.
What got me into clowning? I
Yes, sir.
did. I mean, the whole thing starts kind of in the seventh grade, where I became very passionate about clowning. At my church, they do like carrying clowns. I grew up in the South in Houston, and so they did clearing clowns, and they had a magician come, and I really took to it, and I learned some magic. I had some old Air Jordans that I kind of put foam feet on, and I taped them up, and I spray painted the whole thing, and did my first professional gig for like a nursing home, and got 25, whatever. I don't remember how much I got for it. I would have done it for free, but I did, and then you know, like a lot of things when you're young, I was super into it. And then I got into high school, and I got into girls, and I got into sports, and I kind of like, I don't know. I didn't leave it, but it just kind of was like on life support a little bit. And then when I got into college, I was a diver at the University of Tennessee, a springboard diver. So I was very physical. Um,
No.
but I discovered, and I had done it all through high school, junior Olympics and stuff. But when I got into college, a lot of the guys were just more jocular than I was. Even the swimmers, because I was one diver, but there was a bunch of swimmers, and I don't. It just didn't feel like my tribe, and lovely guys. I still talk to some of them today, but I got into an acting class, and then that acting class, and I got it cast in a play. I'd never done acting because I was an athlete, and when I got into that acting class, it was like 16 girls and me, so I had like plenty of time to act, and it was just great. It was like I was in heaven. And I got with his Diablo Mundo, which is his Argentinian acting troupe, and I did this play called Royal Hunt of the Sun. This Peter Schaffer played at Equus and Amadeus, or kind of his more famous works. And but I remember like being at this restaurant after the play, and all this Argentinian acting group is all sitting around this table at a restaurant. And they're taking it over, and other patrons are looking at it. I'm like, what's going on here? And I thought, like, this is more my tribe. These people are more my people, and like some of them barely speak English. And so when I transferred, so I quit diving in the middle of the year. My coach was not happy, but I quit, and then I moved to Texas because I was paying out of state tuition. I'm from Texas. So I got into acting, but I didn't have any sort of pedigree as an actor. I got into the BFA program, but I didn't know anything. I didn't do high school plays. I didn't know plays really. I just was physical. But I was like, but I could do flips. I could do like a front flip and a back flip, and I could do all this stuff. And I love Shakespeare. So all of a sudden, I started doing like I saw this marriage of these two things, like Shakespeare and clown and this physicality. And on all my free time, I would go to the library, and I would watch these Marx Brothers DVDs and
Nice.
Harold Lloyd and Buster
Oh
Keaton
yeah.
and all this stuff. And I fell in love with this stuff. And I thought, like, this is my avenue. You know, I don't need to have like this. I'm not a Broadway singer or whatever. I'm a clown. So at that time in 1997, as you well know, I'm sure that was I didn't know at the time, but it was the end of the circus school for Barnum and Bailey, and
Oh yeah.
I had auditioned that year. I drove up to Dallas. I mean, long story short, I didn't have a license because of some mistakes that I made. I got my neighbor Cinco in Austin to drive me to Dallas with a couple other people who were just interested in going to audition for Dick Monday to do this clown to an audition. There was a TV crew there and everything. I was like a BFA actor, so I felt like he'll see how talented I am and this sort of thing. And so I get there, and I get there like 20 minutes late, which is not a good look because we got a flat tire and all this. And Dick Monday's kind of, it said on the program in our BFA department that there'd be time afterwards to do a monologue or something, you know. And so, but he was not having it on that day. He was like, I was the late guy. I don't know if he would have even done it if I was on time, but neither here nor there. And he was like, fill out the application. Now, as I learned much later in life, everyone fills out the application, you know. Me not being very clerical, I never did it, and I always kind of had this sort of like, they didn't accept me into clown college, but I never really fully applied, and that's what I've discovered 25 years later. Um, but funny enough, so I didn't go to clown college in '97. That was the last year they did it. I went to Summerstock. I did Puck in Grand Canyon, and I did another play, and then I did Summerstock again in '99. I was living in Austin at the time, and then in 2000 I moved to LA. Now Los Angeles, when I got here, I didn't know what to do with like, I do you work? I want to audition. How do I do it? And so somebody said to me, "It's like, oh, well, you work for like one of these entertainment companies that do clowns and Pikachu's and everything on the weekends." And so I did that for a little bit. One was RT Clown that I worked with, a nice lady, Robin, down in Manhattan Beach. But I was like in these big Pikachu outfits and all this stuff, and kids were kicking me in the balls and stuff, and
Oh no.
I didn't really care for it, but I loved the clowns. And then all of a sudden, this thing that had been dormant for a little bit started kind of coming back to me. And as you might or might not know, with Star, there's only one. It's very cheap to kind of start being a clown. I mean, all you need is some balloons, a pump, a little bit of makeup, and then to do like maybe a tunnel and a parachute, some face paint, and very quickly I learned that like I didn't want to be a onesie clown with a rainbow wig. Like I wanted the real deal. And it was around that time I started working with my company. It was a Clowns for Hire at the time, but then I changed the name because I had to Los Angeles Clown, and that really this was like 2002, so like the internet was kind of not really even a thing yet, and I was like a Clowns for Hire should be in the yellow pages, and I was in LA, so it was a big market. I started doing Los Angeles Clown, and I got the domain name, and then it really started kind of pushing off. And I would do a bunch of parties. I did, I mean, back in those days, I'd do 6 parties. I'd be hungover or whatever. It wouldn't. I did parties all the time, and I was lucky enough to find my way into the Troubadour Theater Company. Because I had heard they did this great Shakespeare stuff with clowns, and I was like, God, that's what I want to do. I love Shakespeare. I love clowns. And so I got into that company, and I did that until 2008 or so, for about a good 4 or 5 years that they kind of like really used me. And it was around that time that I got a call because I was Los Angeles Clown from, I didn't know at the time, it became the McDonald's Corporation. They were looking for assistants to Ronald in the field. And
Oh.
so I was able to join that as a part timer, as a Tom, is what we call it, which is top of the market. And so I became a Tom for the next 10 years. And this whole time, I'm still doing kids' parties. I'm still an actor. So I'm still, and at this point, I've learned to kind of have headshots as a clown and to do more clown stuff. And so I'm booking jobs, I'm booking commercials and little things as a clown, like, Krusty's becoming really popular and stuff, who was kind of a little bit on the negative end back in these days for clowns. Like he was like, kind of smokes and but people like this character, and so I wasn't doing that necessarily, but I was like becoming this sort of like this white face archetype of kind of a crusty type clown, but not really. I'm just me. But like I've always liked to think of my clown as like Superman in his outfit, but right before he launches off, like he's just getting his coffee. Like he's like, I'm just grabbing coffee. I'm gonna get just a little bit more energy. I mean, I'm some Superman all day, all day. So that was kind of my clown persona. It still is actually, and
Nice.
that was the beginning. So then I became like this Tom, and then I was still doing the clown stuff on my own when I could. I had in the middle of all this, I had kids, and so I asked to be a full time Tom, and they were like, "Well, we can't do full, but we can do 3 days a week." And so I started getting more into the program. And then in 2017, which brings us up to when I started directing American Clown, we started the Toms. There was about 100 field assistants to Ronald, is the way we would describe it. So 100 field assistants to Ronald, and all across the country. Southern California had 4 or 5 about, and I was kind of one of those 5. At that time, they decided people were losing their jobs in these other markets, like in Mississippi and stuff. And we thought, like, oh well, that's not going to happen to us. And then it did, and we we're like, oh my god. So I thought I had a producer talking to me for years about like, oh, we should document your life, and I was like, it's nothing that interesting about it. It's like, no, I think we should. And then when that happened, I was like, well, this is really happening right now, and we should at least film this. I think, regardless of what we do, we should film this because it was kind of on this what was happening at the time, and I don't know if it was the same for you guys in Pennsylvania and Florida, but well, I'm sure 'cause it became this national trend that these scary clowns were like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
coming across America, and it was like, and then it was coming out, and then there was these calls we would do in the Ronald program where they'd be like, Ronald's got to lay low because there's, and then in cell phones there was another sort of storm of these cell phones, like everyone has got videos, and no disrespect to these other Toms in different markets, but I remember thinking like it's only a matter of time before somebody gets some weird video with some Tom, and it,
Oh
it
yeah.
just really jeopardizes kind of what this brand is. Like it started to feel like a liability. So and it started to feel like it was really this corporate thing that I think society had embraced, had maybe I guess has had reached its shelf life or something. It was like the same thing with Ringling Brothers. They had been talking about the animals forever, for 20 years, and the thing had improving and stuff, and I don't, whatever, I guess missteps had happened 20 years ago, there was still this like this bigger push to kind of like, let's do something about it. So it took a little longer to react, I think, to what society was demanding they change, and the same thing was happening with Ronald. So when that closed down, we filmed it all, and we filmed everything else, and then the circus was closing, Big Apple closed, and I thought like, what's going on, man? Like, what's going on? And then the clown scare happened, and I would get these calls from Los Angeles, to Los Angeles Clown about this, about, hey, talk to us about the scary clowns coming. And I was like, dude, you guys are pushing this story, man. Like, there's no scary clowns.
Huh.
Um, there's kids in latex masks, but like, I wouldn't call them professional clowns
No.
by any means, and the more you promote this, the more any kid with 16 bucks, like, hey, dude, we could get on the news. We could get, I just it felt, and now you're asking me to come for free, by the way, you know, to the news station to be in makeup and say how they're taking away our jobs and all this sort of stuff. So it really bothered me, and it still does. Like why was our job okay to be axed? Like what was that? I didn't understand it, and I didn't even understand the terminology they were using. They kept saying clowns, clowns, clowns. They weren't saying professional clowns. They weren't saying
No.
people dressed as clowns.
You know what it
They
is?
Yeah, what?
It's a knee jerk reaction to.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it is.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but yeah, we lop it all together. But I didn't like. and I still don't like it when they call politicians clowns. Like there's just the way they kind of bastardize the word a little bit really upsets me. And I
Do
discovered
they
that there
even
isn't
work
kind
that
of like
hard?
a unified.
The
What's that?
politicians. They don't work as hard as clowns do.
No, they don't.
So
I mean, they no. It's like then there's no talent there necessarily, and there's no
Yeah.
major skill, and there's no entertainment, other than it being just like a thorn in your side entertainment. Like, great, yeah, I'm up because there's this thing jabbing me in the side, but it's like a pain. It's more of like they should be calling them kind of more like kidney stones. Um, but so that was the impetus of why this whole journey kind of started. And then when we're doing all the filming and trying to put stuff together, the pandemic happened, and then everybody was out of a job, and it just felt like okay. But then when things came back online, it still felt like we had moved into this arena of that the only, and this is the real tricky problem, and it's still a problem. People's exposure to clowns is all negative for the most
yep.
part, and it's been negative for a lot of people. For the people that choose to see it negatively for the past 20 years, since Poltergeist, when they had the little clown, that
Oh my God, yeah.
you're not seeing positive portrayals of clowns to counteract that image.
True.
If there was no presence, and this is perhaps a bad analogy, and I apologize, but if there was no presence of nuns in a Catholic sort of setting, and all you saw them was on the screen, you would assume they're all possessed. But you have other nuns that are like, seemingly nice. I don't know. I'm not Catholic, but so it's like it counteracts the image. Well, we're not seeing that within the clown verse, really. I mean, we're starting to see a little bit, because I do think we're riding kind of a wave of resurgence with clowns. You see it on TikTok. You see people passionate about it. You see people, doing some of the work. You see a lot of professional clowns using less makeup. You see kind of like, using performance as kind of a little bit more. And we talk about all this in the doc, but I don't know. It became an interesting, and it still is to me. It's like, why is this happening? Like, why? And a larger thing, which I didn't quite expound on in the doc, but something that I think about a fair amount is like, why are we killing this truth teller? People that lampoon authority and that create some sort of a pushback on the oppressor. What's that about? Like, why are we doing that? And that's still my question, and part of what I tried to set out to foster an American clown is like, it's okay. We can still clown. Like don't let the bad guys get you
Well,
down a
that
little
leads
bit.
into a great question I have for you, sir. Where do you
Yeah.
see clowning going in the next 5 years from where it's been, where it's
Um.
came from? Let's say from like the 80s, 90s.
Yeah. Well, I don't see the corporate embrace of clowning, which I think is a good thing. I think that's probably what sort of like led to its demise. I think it was a little bit overplayed in the corporate sphere. I mean, if in the 50s and the 60s, if you go back, like back in that day when especially even with McDonald's, let's take McDonald's for an example. McDonald's used to do for people that are old enough, the McDonald Land stuff. They still dabble in it a little bit, not so much with Ronald anymore, but they have like Grimace and all this stuff. Well, now most of the Happy Meal toys are going to be a Pixar movie or some other tie-in. So they found new ways to tie in merchandising and to tie that consumerism that they can kind of. The clown is too. There's too much liability with the clown now. They don't need that anymore, and they were kind of one of the last sort of groups to kind of still embrace that. I think like Jack in the Box had a clown, Burger King had a clown. Like was not uncommon in the 50s and 60s. Um, there's several reasons why they distanced themselves from the clown. One of them was Supersize Me in the early 2000s, and another one was just, I guess, it wasn't as popular as it used to be. But I think what's happening now is there's a new generation, And this new generation does not have the hangups that the old generation had, and they find themselves very, I don't excited about the anonymity and about the mirth and the sort of the so in answer to your question, B, I think there's going to be a resurgence of clowning. Um, that is the full makeup, but it will not be anything corporate. It's going to be very sort of like underground,
More street
avant-garde, that sort of
performance.
thing. More street performance busking. Some of it will find its way into the circus as people kind of come around to that. Then I think there's this other wing of clowning, which, and I'm using that kind of as a verb, which is happening here in Los Angeles with people like Chad Damiani and Natalie Palamides, and it's like a little bit more buffoonery, uh, but it's like it's almost where improv would stop and sketch comedy. That there's this other sort of, it goes a little bit further with this sort of clowning stuff, and um, and I think that's very vibrant. And at least where I live here in Los Angeles, there's a bunch of people doing it. John Gilkey, these guys. Now they're using it more like a verb than, but it's crazy. It's like fake phalluses. Chad does some stuff like that. Nuded. It gets like risque, kind of almost art performance. Um, but kind of like you're using the audience like a clown would, like you're needing information from them. And then I think for people that don't like long form improv or short form improv or whatever, this is a little bit more just like almost like floor time. Like, floor time is an autistic word, but it's kind of like floor time for a clown. Like, hey, work the room, kill some time, try to make something happen. So I think that is going to continue to permeate, and we'll see that more in art. But it's like there's a division kind of happening, I think. And then there's this, I guess there's a third thing where clowning as we know it is still going to happen, but with people that are more cirque, looking like just a little bit of makeup, looking like a little stitch right here, a little eyebrow, that sort of thing, that they don't have like the bulbous nose or the full white face or that. So
Now, with that said, do you think it's more the makeup and the tradition that makes a clown, or do you think, no makeup, it's the person really with, you know,
Mm.
that makes
for
the clown?
me, I mean, this is just me. It's the heart. For me, it's
Okay.
the empathy. I think empathy is it. I think wanting to pull people out and to give them a little, I don't know, like a little bit of a shot of humanity is, to me personally, what makes the clown. Like, you don't need the shoes, you don't need the nose, you need the vulnerability, and this sort of like the willing yourself. That's,
Sure.
I think, the key elements. There's
Uh, Laurel and
he
Hardy and,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to make a fool of
uh,
yourself, the desire, the passion to make a fool out of yourself, to me, is the embodiment of what it is to clown. I'm sure there's other things that make good clowns too, and I'm sure there's that picture too with I mean, Kukler, who's a great clown, and amazing cigar box artist. I could, when he showed me that picture, it's Ernest Borgnine, it's Lou Jacobs, and then it's his uncle, and then you
yeah,
see you see Adam there as a little kid with
yeah,
that makeup on. I was like, oh my god, dude, that is so cool. It's just like, it's watching, to me that's like it's, what is that, that's like what is that in Italy, the fingers touching. It just like, that was
oh
so
yeah,
pretty.
oh yeah, the painting
Da
or whatever.
Vinci or whatever, like
Yeah,
they're like, like I said, it's the passing of the baton. I love that. But note taken on the yeah.
All
sorry,
right.
be good.
All right. What inspired your look and the face that you have and created for your clown?
Um, well, I always liked. I didn't go to Ringling, even though I auditioned, as I said earlier, and I noticed that a lot of auditions that I would go to, there would be a lot of Auguste clowns, and that's a big Ringling thing. I do have an Auguste that I put on sometimes, but not near as much as I put on my other. And I'm still experimenting with it. If I was going to be completely honest, though, I had been putting on whiteface a fair amount when I worked with Ronald. And so doing that, and I felt comfortable with it, and it was pretty quick. I started thinking, well, what could I do here? And then I started kind of modifying a little bit and kind of turning it out. And then I just found a little thing that I liked, and I found these staples for the eyes. And I thought that looks good. And it started working because I think for especially commercially, the when I first got out here, I worked as a kids clown, like I said, a lot. And then I had somebody call me through the clown company, an advertiser, and they said, we're looking for clowns. I didn't have any good pictures for that, for a bigger clown than my kids clown. And so I said, and I kind of stammered, and I wanted to be Johnny on the spot for them, and so I gave them a number, and it was to my friend Laffy Pants, and he is a good August clown that he's had for years, and we're good friends. He's in the documentary as well, and he got like $30,000 from the commercials. like so much money from just the headshot. And I was like, well, that was a mistake. I'm glad he did it, and he was forever grateful to me. But I was like, I should have those pictures. So I started doing that stuff, and I figured since I'm seeing all these other clowns that are August, to be different in the room. I don't see a lot of white faced clowns that aren't like Pierrette, or like they have like the ruffle, and it just looks like very. I just kind of wanted like a white faced clown that had the attitude of a kind of a goose clown, kind of in the middle. And so I started doing that. And I think because of Krusty and because of people's imagining of what a clown is, more often than not, they liked the white face. Like, oh, that looks like a clown to me. That looks like a clown. I think it does backfire sometimes. I just did something for Fox Sports, or I don't know. Anyway, I was an audition. I sent it out. They're all self tapes now, and I don't think I'll get it. I think probably because it's like, like it's a different. Like I'm going high. I'm going high each time, and sometimes they want a medium, or they want a low, or they want like the rainbow wig guy. You never know exactly what they want. I mean, to me, they could be like, you could make me that, or you could just ask me to do that. But whatever, they see what they see, and that's what they see. So it's not like it's not like a it doesn't always work, is what I'm trying to say. But you never know. You never know what people's tastes are, and I'm most comfortable doing my clown the way that I do it. And people that know anything about clowns could be like, oh, well, he can do a different clowns if you need him to. It's the persona that you're getting. Gilly's this, Gilly's this, Gilly's all those things depending on what you need. So, but I don't know if everybody that's not a clown knows that.